When there's a story like what USC was like and UCLA last Thursday, or back a year ago with Texas and Oklahoma, and those are the ones who are moving into a different part of the neighborhood and the ones who are making moves that they feel like benefit them, whether it's financially or elsewhere as well. It's okay. It's part of the league. It's part of it's part of America. But sometimes there's also the various programs when you let the initial dust settle. What about them? And the Big 12's been through that 3 times in the last 12 years. The Pac-12's going through it now. Washington State, Oregon State, some of the teams you don't hear mentioned are programs or schools. Colton Clark joins us, part of the Spokesman-Review, and covers Wazoo, Washington State Cougars. Colton, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. It's been a week and 8 days since that story hit on Thursday. What was your reaction then? And was part of it, oh my God, what can Washington State do?
Yeah, well, kind of like everybody else. Thanks for having me, by the way.
You're welcome.
Kind of like everybody else, shock initially, and like, for Wazoo, and not from my, objective standpoint, just seeing what Wazoo fans and the alums and everyone is thinking is kind of a hopefulness that this works out and they can stay in the Power Five, but also definitely a fear, a little bit of anxiety there, just knowing that, this is a team that joined the Pacific Coast Conference, like, what is it, 104, 105 years ago or something like that. And it's like the whole existence of this, historic league is now being threatened, and Washington State's membership, of course, everybody's talked about Washington State and Oregon State, the smaller market members, maybe on the outside looking in. And so right now, it's just everybody's kind of in a wait and see right now, and just like, oh, well, hopefully we're not the ones on the chopping block here. We've been in this thing forever, and who knows right now? It's just a fluid thing, and it seems like every day it's like, oh, they're talking with the ACC. Oh, now they're not doing that. The Big 12 is going to add these teams. No, the Big 12 is not going to do that. So I think like everybody else, or not like everybody else, but like the 2 smaller market members and the officials of the Pac-12 is kind of just, obviously they're working behind the scenes, but kind of crossing their fingers for the small market teams, because that would just be more than a gut punch. That's a relegation pretty much.
What is Wazoo's sales pitch to stay in the Power Five if it should come to that?
Well, I think that history is a big part of it too. It's they weren't a charter member, but a year or 2 later after the PCC was formed, they were in there. Pac-8, they were one of the original Pac-8. Competitiveness, I think, across the board. Lots of programs at Wazoo. Football is always in a bowl game. Men's basketball is on the rise. Women's basketball, best 2 seasons in program history the last 2 years. Women's soccer is always in the NCAA tournament. Volleyball is always ranked. So it's like these are teams that have beaten top-tier competition. They're always up there with the top-tier competition. I think, obviously, media market, that hurts them. But, I've talked to a lot of people that say, hey, it's like a big chunk of the Seattle market does belong to Washington State. Not all those Spokane, Tri-Cities, kind of the eastern Washington area is not huge needle mover there, but there's lots of little strongholds across the state, and then in southern Idaho, Boise, I assume that there is pockets of Washington State fans everywhere, and I think there is, some people may argue, not as relevant as a program as others, but Old Crimson game day, I think that's some exposure. Like, people know who Washington State is. The thing that people like to talk about around here is you see Kook stuff all over the place. So, I think competitiveness is the thing, and then definitely, people know who Washington State is for sure. Aside from that, but the tough ones definitely the arguing that, hey, we're going to move the needle financially in terms of a TV market, because it's apparently that's what this whole thing boils down to.
Absolutely. And there's so many that could be left in the dust or twisted in the wind, as I've said, and we've seen this happen, as you know, Colton, in the Big 12 3 different times when they've had teams go elsewhere. What about the state the state politics? There was the reaction of wow, they didn't take Washington and Oregon or maybe even Stanford or whatever else. And still nothing's happened in 8 days, although everyone thought that was going to be like an immediate thing. But Washington and Oregon are still there. They're still a part of the conference. Is there anything political or state government or politics connecting the Washington State, and they would be protected, Washington State, because, if Washington decides to do something?
That's something that I have heard at somebody who knows much more about this than I said. It's kind of like a little less than a toss-up, as in it maybe there's going to be a push from lawmakers, whatever, because I know that actually there are a number of kind of considerable politicians that are Wazoo grads, but besides the point, trying to keep the public schools together. I know that there's been kind of a push for that, but and of course I'm no expert on the specifics of political stuff. I'm more of the sports guy. But no, I do understand the asking that and that being a part of it, and definitely I have heard of a push there, and one of the guys who I work with who's more in tune with that kind of stuff has written about it a little bit. But he said I guess at best it's like, maybe not. Like this could happen, I think is what it's at right now, is like could, but the chances of state political powerful people being able to do that, from what I've heard at least, kind of just long story short, is that it's not completely likely. Like it's possible, but not likely. Hopefully that's again, I'm not really an expert in that field as much, and
right.
Something I definitely need to get more knowledgeable about as the weeks go on here. But that's just basically from what I've heard, is like, oh, this is a possibility, examining, though this might not work out. If that helps. Sorry, I couldn't help you more there.
No. Hey, listen, when it comes to politics, I tune it out pretty quickly.
Well,
I'm not Craig. Paul and Craig are much more in tune to that.
Well, look, and Colton, I'll tell you, just in the example in Texas, it kind of depends on who the governor is. So, when the Big 12 was formed initially, Ann Richards kept a lot of the Texas schools together, and Bob Bullock, who was the lieutenant governor, kind of used whatever political might they could to make sure that Baylor and Tech and Texas and Texas A&M were going to the Big 12 together. They made that happen, and they made sure that Baylor and Tech were included, and some schools got left out. But look, when Texas A&M wanted to leave, and Rick Perry, the governor at the time, was an Aggie, he didn't use any political might to stop anything, because he's like, well, my school wanted to go somewhere. So, I don't know what Jay Inslee, where his loyalties lie, but it doesn't seem to me that he would get all that involved in it, right? So,
yeah, I mean, he is a University of Washington grad, so not to say anything there. So, like you just said, man, maybe he wants the best outcome for his alma mater, and maybe that's the Big Ten. Hopefully not in the case of the rest of the Pac-12 teams. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point for sure.
Yeah. Well, Colton, do you think that, of course you're going to be happy to stay in the Power 5, but do you think that Wazoo fans would be happy to be in the Big 12, that they would enjoy those matchups if that's what they had to do?
Oh yeah, I think so. And I've already seen some people talking about like, late night air it out type of game. I know the Big 12, of course I don't watch a ton of Big 12. Really don't have time, but the fireworks of the conference, is obviously a big talking point, and Wazoo kind of fits in that. And so I have seen some people be like, hey, there could be some truly entertaining games between those two. And of course, geographically, it does fit better than anything else, I guess, on the table right now. There's a little bit of like people have talked about, that was one of my favorite football games, 2018 Alamo Bowl, Wazoo, Iowa State. That was a terrific one, So there's like a tiny bit of background there, and I have heard that seems like the outcome that's kind of, I guess, as of right now, kind of a best case scenario. It does seem like Wazoo people, from what I've heard from talking to different, alums who are kind of notable figures, and different former players, and Bill Moose, former athletic director, and he's like, that's kind of the best possible outcome in his mind is sort of a merger or crossover, whatever, loose partnership, whatever terms they want to use.
All right, Colton, we'll see what happens. It does seem like there's immediately this haves and have-nots. We've seen this before. It's interesting. Good luck with what happens whenever it is at Washington State. And also, thanks for your time on the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. It'll be for sure an interesting football season and media day later this month. I'm excited for that.
The Big 12 the Big 12 media days are next Wednesday and Thursday, so we'll get an eyeful of that or an earful of that very soon. Thank you very much, Colton Clark. We will be at AT&T Stadium, the home of the Cowboys, but also the home of Big 12 media days next Wednesday and Thursday.